So this is the puzzle. You've learned some new and effective reading strategies in the first half of this course, and yet you're not necessarily using them when you sit down to do your own reading. Why? Why do we remain devoted to word-by-word reading even after we've learned other effective strategies? To address this puzzle, let's think back to how most of us learned to read in the first place. Imagine you are a child. Before you can read by yourself, a parent, grandparent, teacher, or sibling reads to you, out loud, each word in order from beginning to end. Then you learn to read. First, you learn the alphabet. You learn the sounds that each letter represents. At some point, you begin to read and spell words. And eventually, you learn how to read whole sentences and paragraphs. You practice by reading out loud to parents and to teachers. When you mispronounce a word, or skip a word, or struggle to sound out a word, what happens? Your parent or teacher stops you, corrects you, and asks you to read the word again. Maybe even the whole sentence again. This strategy of reading every word in order, start to finish, works really well for the purpose of learning how to read, how to decipher the code of written language. This strategy takes you far. You do well in school, and you arrive where you are today, in college, or in a professional position, or simply living your life as a literate person. At least some aspects of this story probably reflect your own experience of learning to read. Some of the lessons you learned were very explicit ones. Your explicit, conscious learning involved what your teachers, parents, or other authorities told you. For example, that B is for the sound B, or a period marks the end of a sentence. But as a child learning to read, you also learn lessons that weren't explicitly stated. Implicit, unconscious lessons. Implicit lessons might have included, for example, go slowly so as to get it all exactly right, and don't jump to the end, that would be cheating. Implicit learning is in a sense a stowaway that sneaks in and gets on board alongside your explicit conscious learning without your even being aware of its presence and its impact on your experience. As we grow up, we carry forward with us from childhood a long litany of these explicit and implicit lessons, the rights and wrongs of reading. Think of all the rules, the shoulds and shouldn'ts that you might have learned as you were learning how to read. All these rights and wrongs, even if they contradict one another, and even if you don't consciously remember learning them, all bear moral weight. These explicit and implicit lessons and the moral imperatives they carry with them can affect how you approach reading even now. For example, you might carry with you the feeling that it's wrong to say that you've read something unless you've read each and every word of it. So, here we are. We learn to read, and read quite well using a linear word-by-word approach. Along the way, we learned implicitly that any other strategy isn't quite right or legitimate. So any strategy other than word-by-word reading seems like sloppiness, laziness, or even cheating. Because implicit learning is unconscious, it goes unexamined and unquestioned by us. It feels inherently true. It becomes a powerful force, implicitly influencing how we think and feel and behave until we pause and notice it for what it is, become aware of how it operates in our life, question it, and even challenge it. In this next exercise, consider your own experience of learning to read. In what ways was the story you just heard similar to or different from your experience? What are the explicit and implicit lessons you learned as a young reader and have brought with you into your current life? You'll see a list of rules that other students have said were part of their experience of learning to read. Check all that you recognize as part of your experience too. Many students are surprised at how many items they check. Here you go.